The Grave Diggers. On November 12, 1966, a group of 5 men is engaged in the somber task of preparing a grave within a quiet cemetery in Clendenin, West Virginia. Their work is suddenly interrupted when they observe a figure they later describe to authorities as a large, winged, brown human being moving deliberately through the nearby trees. Instead of flying forward like a bird, the creature reportedly ascends vertically from the ground with incredible speed, a movement the witnesses compare to a helicopter lifting straight off its pad. The men, all practical laborers, are left stunned by the physically impossible sight, struggling to reconcile the bizarre aerial maneuver with any known animal or machine. This encounter, occurring in broad daylight, provides a level of credibility that many subsequent nighttime sightings would lack, a detail often overlooked in more sensational retellings. The Clendenin event is officially recognized as the first credible, documented sighting in the 1966 wave, primarily because it involves multiple, sober witnesses who immediately report their consistent experience. Because the 5 men provide independent testimonies that corroborate one another, their account quickly circulates among local law enforcement and news outlets, therefore legitimizing the phenomenon in the public consciousness. This initial report establishes key characteristics that will become hallmarks of the Mothman legend, including its imposing humanoid shape, its massive wings, and its unnatural mode of flight. Investigators at the time find no conventional explanation for what the grave diggers witnessed, officially ruling out local wildlife and dismissing the possibility of a coordinated hoax. Just 3 days later, this isolated and perplexing incident in a cemetery gives way to a far more terrifying and direct encounter on a lonely road outside Point Pleasant. The Scarberries and Mallets, on the night of November 15, 1966, just 3 days after the Clendenin incident, 2 young couples drive near the outskirts of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Roger and Linda Scarberry, accompanied by Steve and Mary Mallet, are passing the abandoned North Power Plant within the sprawling, isolated complex known as the TNT area. Their leisurely drive is violently interrupted when their headlights illuminate a creature standing by the roadside, which they describe as being 6 to 7 feet tall with a 10-foot wingspan and enormous glowing red eyes. As the terrified couples speed away, the entity launches into the air and begins pursuing their vehicle, effortlessly keeping pace even as their speedometer climbs toward 100 miles per hour. The chase continues all the way to the city limits, with the creature emitting no sound other than the beat of its powerful wings. Shaken and convinced they have seen something that is not of this world, the 4 witnesses drive directly to the Mason County Courthouse to find a police officer. They locate Deputy Millard Halstead and provide a frantic yet coherent report of their high-speed pursuit by the winged being with hypnotic red eyes. Halstead, who personally knows the families, takes their account seriously because their fear is palpable and they are not known for fabricating stories. He later remarks that he had known these kids all their lives and they had never been in any trouble. The deputy even follows the Scarberries back toward the TNT area to investigate, but finds no physical evidence of the creature, though he does note an odd radio interference near the site, a phenomenon later reported by numerous other witnesses in the area. This highly dramatic encounter, reported by 4 credible individuals, provides the critical details that transform a local curiosity into a national news story. The detailed testimony from the Scarberries and Mallets galvanizes the local media, leading the Point Pleasant Register to publish an article that officially coins the name Mothman. With a memorable name and a terrifying story of a car chase now in circulation, sightings escalate across the region, creating widespread public panic. The TNT area. The West Virginia Ordnance Works, known by locals almost exclusively as the TNT area, is a sprawling, decommissioned World War II munitions plant located just outside Point Pleasant. This massive expanse covers hundreds of acres of dense forest, crisscrossed by decaying roads and dotted with enormous concrete storage bunkers, which residents refer to as igloos. Following the widely publicized Scarberry and Mallet incident, this eerie and isolated government property becomes the undisputed epicenter of the Mothman sightings. The area's inherent strangeness with its abandoned military structures and overgrown wilderness, provides the perfect environment for such a creature to seemingly operate and therefore fuels public speculation about its origins and purpose. Throughout the following year, over 100 distinct eyewitness reports place the Mothman within or directly adjacent to the TNT area, solidifying its status as the creature's primary domain. This sheer volume of consistent sightings leads many locals to conclude that the creature is using the secluded woods and abandoned bunkers as its lair or nesting ground. As a result, the location transforms into a macabre tourist attraction, drawing thrill-seekers, reporters, and paranormal investigators who comb the woods for any sign of the winged entity. The site was known to be heavily polluted from its time as a munitions plant, a detail that some researchers later theorized could be a factor in the strange phenomena. The concentration of activity in this single, well-defined location provides a focal point for the growing mystery. The influx of reports from the TNT area attracts professional researchers who seek to document and explain the escalating phenomenon. Red eyes. Across more than 100 separate reports filed between 1966 and 1967, a remarkably consistent physical description of the Mothman emerges from the witness testimonies. The creature is almost universally described as standing between 6 and 7 feet tall, with a massive wingspan consistently estimated to be over 10 feet wide. Perhaps its most unsettling physical feature, reported by nearly every witness, is its apparent lack of a discernible head or neck, with its most prominent feature being 2 enormous circular red eyes set into its upper torso. Witnesses often struggle to find the words for this feature, frequently comparing the eyes to glowing red bicycle reflectors orbs that seem to shine with their own internal light. This anatomical impossibility, a headless body with luminous eyes, becomes a non-negotiable component of nearly every credible sighting. The psychological impact of these eyes is reported with as much consistency as their physical appearance, and it is this effect that truly terrifies those who encounter the creature. Witnesses consistently report that meeting the creature's gaze induces an overwhelming and irrational sense of pure terror, a paralyzing fear that transcends simple fright. This reported psychic or hypnotic effect is so profound that many individuals, including the Scarberries and Mallets, claim the memory of the eyes alone causes them lingering anxiety for weeks. Some biologists have attempted to explain the phenomenon as the eye shine of a large owl, but this fails to account for the reported size, shape, and hypnotic quality of the glow. It is not merely the sight of a monster that frightens people, but the specific, debilitating horror that seems to emanate directly from its piercing red gaze. The creature's most consistently reported feature, its hypnotic, terror-inducing red eyes, becomes a central element of the legend, drawing the attention of paranormal investigators who seek to understand the nature of the entity's apparent influence over its witnesses. John Keel. As the Mothman phenomenon escalates, it attracts the attention of John Keel, a prominent author and investigator specializing in UFOs and other paranormal subjects. Arriving in Point Pleasant in late 1966, Keel approaches the situation not as a hunter seeking to capture a specimen, but as a dedicated chronicler determined to document the full scope of the town's anomalous experiences. He systematically interviews hundreds of witnesses, collects official police reports, and meticulously records every strange occurrence, which will later form the basis for his definitive 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies. Keel's professional and journalistic approach lends a new level of gravitas to the situation, therefore transforming a series of local monster scares into a complex case study for paranormal research. His work ultimately provides the most comprehensive and detailed public record of the events that transpired during this 13-month period. Keel quickly determines that the Mothman is not an isolated anomaly, but is instead one component of a much larger puzzle affecting the entire Ohio Valley region. He is the first major investigator to formally connect the creature sightings to a concurrent spike in UFO reports, bizarre electrical malfunctions, and unsettling visits from mysterious men in black. This leads him to develop his window area theory, which posits that Point Pleasant is a unique geographical location where paranormal activity of all kinds seems to manifest with unusual frequency. This holistic approach departed sharply from traditional cryptozoology, which would have focused exclusively on identifying a biological creature. Keel therefore theorizes that Mothman is not a simple animal but an ultra-terrestrial entity tied directly to the other strange events plaguing the town. Keel's investigation documents not just the creature, but also a disturbing pattern of prophetic dreams and psychic phenomena reported by the town's residents. These premonitions, meticulously recorded in his files, suggest the Mothman's presence is not random, but is instead a harbinger of a looming, catastrophic event. Men in Black. Shortly after the initial wave of media coverage, a new and more sinister phenomenon begins to afflict the residents of Point Pleasant. Witnesses who give interviews to journalists or speak openly with investigators like John Keel report receiving unnerving visits from strange, dark-suited men. These individuals, soon dubbed the Men in Black, often travel in pristine, vintage, black Cadillacs that appear out of place in rural West Virginia. During these encounters, the visitors demonstrate an impossible level of knowledge, referencing intimate details about the witnesses' private lives that could not have been obtained through normal means. The primary purpose of these visits is always the same. They issue direct, unambiguous warnings, urging people to cease all discussion of what they saw in the TNT area. The appearance of these mysterious figures adds a significant layer of high-stakes conspiracy to the already baffling events, shifting the narrative from a simple monster hunt to a potential cover-up. Because the Men in Black display an uncanny awareness and operate with an unnerving, non-human effect, witnesses are left deeply shaken and far more reluctant to speak publicly. John Keel documents numerous MIB encounters, theorizing they are not government agents but another manifestation of the same paranormal force responsible for the Mothman and UFO sightings. Keel described them not as human agents but as bizarre, almost robotic entities disguised as men. This coordinated campaign of intimidation suggests that some powerful, intelligent force is actively trying to manage or suppress information about the events unfolding in the town. The organized effort by these Men in Black to silence witnesses implies that the Mothman sightings are not random occurrences but are instead precursors to a significant, predictable event that certain entities do not want publicized. Indrid Cold. While the town grapples with sightings of a winged monster, a completely different type of entity makes contact with a local salesman named Woodrow Derenberger. On November 2, 1966, while driving home near Parkersburg, Derenberger reports being stopped on the highway by a strange vehicle from which a man emerges, communicating with him purely through telepathy. This being, who introduces himself as Indrid Cold, is described not as a creature but as a broadly grinning man with an odd, dark complexion and an unsettling, non-human demeanor. The encounter is not overtly threatening but is profoundly bizarre, representing a direct, intelligent communication that stands in stark contrast to the silent, terrifying appearances of the Mothman. Because Derenberger is a respected family man with no history of fabrication, his detailed report is taken seriously by investigators and adds a significant new dimension to the region's high strangeness. Over a series of subsequent telepathic contacts, Indrid Cold provides Derenberger with cryptic information and vague yet persistent warnings about a great tragedy that will soon affect the Point Pleasant area. This specific interaction solidifies the idea that the phenomena are not random, but are part of a deliberate build-up to a specific, foretold event, giving rise to the prophecies element of the legend. Investigators like John Keel connect these communications directly to the Mothman sightings, theorizing they are two different manifestations of the same overarching intelligence attempting to warn the local population. Derenberger would later claim he was eventually taken aboard Cold's craft and shown images of the future. The grinning man's unsettling premonitions combined with the escalating Mothman sightings therefore create an intense sense of impending doom throughout the community. This pervasive dread, fueled by both creature sightings and direct prophetic warnings, becomes intrinsically linked to the largest piece of infrastructure in Point Pleasant, the Silver Bridge. The warnings. In the months leading up to December 1967, investigator John Keel and several Point Pleasant residents begin receiving a series of bizarre and untraceable phone calls. These communications are not from human callers but consist of high-pitched electronic screeches, odd beeping tones, and heavily distorted mechanical-sounding voices that seem to speak in a strange, non-human cadence. Despite the garbled delivery, the messages that can be deciphered convey a consistent and terrifying theme. A major disaster is imminent, specifically one that will occur on or near the river. Keel meticulously documents these calls, noting their technological strangeness and the chilling accuracy of the details they sometimes contain about his own private activities, which reinforces his belief that he is dealing with a non-human intelligence. This barrage of prophetic warnings coming from telepathic entities like Indrid Cold and anonymous electronic voices causes a palpable sense of dread to settle over the entire Point Pleasant community. The constant feeling that something terrible is about to happen becomes a part of daily life for many residents, especially those who have had direct contact with the phenomena. Keel theorized these were not prank calls but were instead part of the same ultra-terrestrial phenomenon as the Mothman itself. Because these premonitions are so widespread and specific in their mention of a river-based catastrophe, attention naturally begins to fixate on the most prominent and vulnerable structure spanning the Ohio River. The collective anxiety is no longer about a strange creature in the woods, but about an impending large-scale tragedy that feels both predictable and unavoidable. On December 15, 1967, these numerous cryptic warnings find their horrific fulfillment as the Silver Bridge collapses into the Ohio River during rush hour. The Silver Bridge, at approximately 5 p.m. during evening rush hour on December 15, 1967, the I-35 Silver Bridge, the primary artery connecting Point Pleasant, West Virginia, to Gallipolis, Ohio, experiences a sudden and catastrophic structural failure. A subsequent federal investigation identifies the cause as a minute stress crack in a single eye-bar within one of the main suspension chains, a flaw that proves fatal to the bridge's unique, non-redundant design. This single point of failure triggers a cascading collapse, and the entire bridge structure buckles and plunges into the frigid Ohio River in under 60 seconds. The disaster unfolds so rapidly that dozens of cars, filled with commuters and holiday shoppers, have no chance to escape as the roadway disappears beneath them. The final death toll from the collapse is confirmed to be 46 people, a devastating tragedy that becomes the horrifying fulfillment of the many prophecies and warnings that had plagued the town for over a year. For the residents who had lived in fear, the disaster is not a random engineering accident, but the prophesied event foretold by the Mothman's appearances and the cryptic messages documented by John Keel. While the official cause was material failure, locals could not dismiss the 13 months of preceding phenomena as mere coincidence. The collapse, therefore, cements the creature's legacy in local folklore, transforming it from a simple monster into a complex omen of death and destruction. In the immediate aftermath of the disaster, investigators scour the wreckage for an engineering cause, while paranormal researchers note a stunning and immediate cessation of all related phenomena. The aftermath. In the direct aftermath of the tragedy, investigators and locals piece together a chilling timeline, with multiple reports claiming the Mothman was seen perched on the Silver Bridge structure in the days leading up to its failure. Some accounts even place the creature near the bridge just moments before the collapse, solidifying its connection not just to the town, but to the specific site of the disaster. Following the December 15th catastrophe, the barrage of paranormal activity that had plagued Point Pleasant for 13 months comes to an abrupt and total halt. The Mothman sightings, the strange phone calls, and the visits from men in black all cease completely, as if a switch has been flipped. This sudden silence is as profound and meaningful as the constant activity that came before it, suggesting the creature's purpose in the area was intrinsically linked to the bridge's fate. This abrupt departure leaves the community and researchers with a powerful and enduring question: was the Mothman a harbinger of doom or its cause? One theory posits that the creature was a neutral entity attempting to warn residents of the impending structural failure, its terrifying appearance simply a byproduct of its otherworldly nature. Conversely, another interpretation paints the Mothman as a malevolent figure, drawn to the site to either instigate the disaster or feed on the resulting human terror. While isolated sightings have been reported in other parts of the world in subsequent decades, the concentrated Point Pleasant flap remains a unique, singular event. With its apparent message delivered, the creature vanishes from West Virginia, leaving behind a permanent legacy. The official investigation blamed a broken eyebar for the collapse, but for the people who lived through it, the Silver Bridge disaster forever fused the Mothman to the role of a modern, terrifying oracle. The Freiburg Miners. Nearly a decade after the Mothman vanished from West Virginia, a strikingly similar event occurs on September 10, 1978, at a mine in Freiburg, Germany. A group of more than 20 miners arriving for their morning shift are prevented from entering the facility when they encounter a large, winged creature with glowing red eyes blocking the main entrance. The entity reportedly lets out a high-pitched, terrifying shriek, an action that causes the entire crew to retreat in panic. Believing the creature to be a bad omen, the terrified miners adamantly refuse to go to work, despite the potential professional consequences for abandoning their posts. This collective decision, based entirely on their frightening encounter, proves to be critically important. Just 1 hour after the miners flee the scene, the mine they were scheduled to enter experiences a sudden and total structural collapse. Had the men proceeded with their shift as planned, the event would have resulted in a catastrophic loss of life, but the creature's intervention directly prevents this tragedy. This incident provides one of the strongest pieces of evidence for the interpretation of Mothman as a protective entity or a harbinger attempting to warn humans of impending danger. Unlike the Silver Bridge, where the warning was ambiguous, the Freiburg encounter involved a direct physical intervention that saved dozens of lives. The parallels to the Point Pleasant case are unmistakable, from the creature's appearance to its association with a disastrous structural failure. The Freiburg mine collapse provides a powerful counter-narrative to the American tragedy, suggesting the creature's purpose is not to cause fear, but to prevent death, thereby cementing its modern legacy as a global omen of disaster. Chernobyl. In the weeks leading up to April 26, 1986, a handful of workers at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in the Ukrainian SSR report experiencing a series of profoundly disturbing events. Several individuals claim to witness a large black bird-like entity, which they describe as headless but featuring prominent glowing red eyes, flying in the vicinity of the Reactor 4 complex. These sightings are reportedly accompanied by other eerie phenomena, as certain personnel recount receiving strange, threatening phone calls and suffering from intense, shared nightmares predicting a terrible accident. Due to the highly controlled and secretive nature of the Soviet facility, these accounts are not widely circulated at the time and are largely dismissed as products of stress or overwork. The creature's specific focus on Reactor 4, however, would soon be seen in a much more terrifying context. The subsequent explosion of the reactor creates the worst nuclear disaster in history, and the reports of the Black Bird of Chernobyl resurface in its aftermath, casting the creature once again as a direct omen of catastrophe. The parallels to the Point Pleasant events are striking, from the physical description of a headless, winged entity to its appearance at the precise location of an impending, large-scale tragedy. This incident therefore strengthens the theory that the Mothman is not a unique American phenomenon, but a recurring global harbinger. While the Chernobyl accounts are more anecdotal and less officially documented than the West Virginia wave, the details align too closely for paranormal researchers to dismiss. The creature's reported presence before the meltdown suggests its warnings are not limited to one country or one type of disaster. The Chernobyl case, along with the Freiburg incident, helps cement the Mothman's modern identity as an entity drawn to places of profound human suffering and technological failure. The Mexico quake. On September 19, 1985, Mexico City is violently shaken by a catastrophic 8.1 magnitude earthquake that devastates the urban landscape and results in thousands of casualties. In the chaotic aftermath, as rescuers search through the rubble and survivors share their harrowing experiences, a number of unsettling stories begin to circulate among the population. Multiple independent witnesses come forward claiming they saw a large, dark, winged figure flying near buildings moments before those specific structures collapsed under the seismic stress. These accounts consistently describe the entity as a silent observer that appeared to be moving away from the points of imminent destruction, as if it possessed foreknowledge of which buildings would fall. The reports emerge organically from the chaos told by people who had no prior knowledge of the Point Pleasant legend. The Mexico City earthquake sightings significantly expand the context of the Mothman phenomenon, linking the creature's appearance to a massive natural disaster for the first time. This event suggests that the harbinger's warnings are not limited to technological or man-made failures like a bridge or a nuclear reactor, but encompass geological catastrophes as well. Because the figure was reportedly seen fleeing from the collapsing structures rather than interacting with them, these accounts strongly support the theory that the Mothman is a warning entity, not a malevolent one. These reports are primarily anecdotal and were compiled after the fact, making them more difficult to verify than the concentrated Point Pleasant sightings. The consistency of the descriptions, however, adds a crucial chapter to the creature's ongoing global mythology. This expansion of the Mothman's association, from localized accidents to large-scale natural disasters, sets the stage for its supposed connection to one of the most significant tragedies of the modern era. September 11th. Following the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001, a specific photograph begins to circulate widely across the internet, capturing the public's imagination and fear. The image shows a dark, winged shape in the sky near the North Tower of the World Trade Center as smoke and fire pour from the structure. For those familiar with the lore of Point Pleasant, the implication is immediate and chilling. They interpret this ambiguous figure as a modern sighting of the Mothman. Because the creature's legend is so deeply tied to preceding major disasters, this photograph is therefore presented online as powerful evidence of its presence at yet another scene of profound tragedy. The image quickly becomes one of the most famous and debated pieces of supposed evidence in the creature's history. Despite its powerful symbolic impact, the photograph remains highly contentious, with most sober analysis concluding that the shape is likely a bird, a piece of falling debris, or simply a coincidental photographic artifact. The distance and angle of the shot make any definitive identification impossible, but the context of the event itself lends the image its narrative power. The story of the sighting persists not because of its authenticity, but because it fits perfectly into the established pattern of a harbinger appearing at moments of extreme human suffering. In the age of the internet, a compelling narrative can spread faster and more effectively than a factual debunking. The image is therefore absorbed into the legend, regardless of its probable mundane explanation. This widely circulated photograph cements the Mothman's status as a modern myth, a dark oracle whose presence is now suspected at nearly every major disaster of the 21st century. The 35W Bridge. On August 1, 2007, during evening rush hour in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the 8-lane I-35W Mississippi River Bridge experiences a sudden and catastrophic structural failure. The entire steel truss arch bridge buckles and collapses into the river below, a disaster that ultimately claims the lives of 13 people and injures 145 more. In the weeks preceding this event, a small number of unconfirmed sightings of a Mothman-like creature are reportedly made in the Minneapolis area, with some accounts specifically placing the entity near the bridge. Because the circumstances so closely mirror the Point Pleasant tragedy, a major interstate bridge collapse during peak traffic, these reports are immediately seized upon by paranormal researchers and the public. This modern event serves as a chilling, real-world echo of the Silver Bridge disaster from 40 years prior. The collapse of the I-35W bridge revitalizes the Mothman legend for a new generation, demonstrating the story's enduring power and ability to adapt to contemporary tragedies. While the Minneapolis sightings are far less numerous and officially documented than the original Point Pleasant wave, the narrative's parallel structure is too compelling for many to ignore. The story spreads rapidly through internet forums and paranormal websites, therefore solidifying the idea that the Harbinger is not a historical artifact, but an ongoing phenomenon. The official investigation would later attribute the collapse to a design flaw in the bridge's gusset plates, a single-point failure eerily reminiscent of the broken eye-bar that doomed the Silver Bridge. This event proves that the core elements of the prophecy, a winged omen and a collapsing bridge, remain deeply resonant in the public consciousness. The I-35W bridge collapse reaffirms the Mothman's specific association with catastrophic structural failure, cementing its legacy as one of America's most persistent and evolving urban legends. Chicago Mothman. Beginning in the spring of 2017, a new and concentrated wave of sightings emerges from a major American metropolis, this time centered around the city of Chicago and the shoreline of Lake Michigan. Over the next several years, investigators compile more than 55 separate eyewitness reports documenting encounters with a large, bat-winged humanoid figure. Witnesses consistently describe a creature that is remarkably similar to the Point Pleasant original, detailing its immense wingspan, its dark, humanoid shape, and its distinct, glowing red eyes. Because these sightings are documented in the digital age with modern recording tools and social media, they receive immediate and widespread attention, therefore reigniting intense public debate about the creature's existence. This modern cluster of reports introduces the phenomenon to an entirely new generation, generating the same familiar sense of unease that once gripped West Virginia. The sheer volume of consistent reports coming out of the Chicago area poses a significant challenge to skeptics and a compelling new case for paranormal investigators. This modern flap forces researchers to ask a fundamental question: is this a return of the same entity from the 1960s, or has the phenomenon simply reappeared in a new geographical window area? Unlike the Point Pleasant case, the Chicago sightings are not tied to a single, climactic disaster, a fact that complicates any attempt to interpret their ultimate meaning or purpose. Several dedicated investigators have meticulously catalogued these reports, creating a robust public database of the encounters for ongoing study. The ongoing nature of these sightings suggests the Mothman is not merely a historical footnote but a persistent, recurring feature of American folklore, proving the fear it generates is just as real for Chicagoans today. The Chicago sightings demonstrate that the Mothman legend continues to evolve, leaving each new generation to grapple with the same unsettling question: is this creature a benevolent sentinel trying to warn of disaster, or is it the terrifying spectre of doom itself? The Harbinger theory, the most enduring explanation for the Mothman phenomenon, is the Harbinger theory, which posits that the creature does not cause disasters, but rather appears in order to warn of them. This framework re-evaluates decades of sightings, from Point Pleasant to Chernobyl, suggesting the entity is drawn to the psychic or temporal resonance of an impending catastrophe. According to this theory, the Mothman is not a malevolent monster hunting for victims, but a complex messenger whose presence serves as an urgent, if terrifying, signal to pay attention. Its appearances before the Silver Bridge collapse, the Freiburg mine disaster, and other tragedies are therefore interpreted not as threats, but as failed or successful attempts at communication. The terror witnesses experience is seen as an unfortunate but unavoidable side effect of an encounter with a being that operates outside human comprehension. This theory opens up several speculative possibilities regarding the creature's true nature, questioning if it is a biological cryptid with advanced sensory abilities, an interdimensional being, or even some form of angelic or time-traveling entity. Regardless of its origin, its function under the Harbinger theory remains consistent across all reported incidents. It is an omen. Because the creature is consistently seen at the precipice of tragedy, its appearance is interpreted as a final, desperate alarm bell before an event becomes irreversible. This view aligns with the Freiburg miners, who were physically blocked from entering the mine, suggesting a direct protective intervention. This perspective fundamentally shifts the Mothman's role from a creature to be feared into a phenomenon to be understood. Ultimately, the Harbinger theory transforms the Mothman from a simple regional monster into a powerful and persistent modern myth, a symbol of the thin veil between our perceived reality and the catastrophic events that can shatter it in an instant. The skeptic's view. Skeptics and biologists offer a compelling counter-narrative to the paranormal theories, centering on the misidentification of a known large bird, most commonly the sandhill crane. This avian species can stand nearly 4 feet tall and possesses a wingspan that approaches 7 feet, closely matching the scale reported by many witnesses. Crucially, the sandhill crane has distinctive, featherless red skin patches around its eyes, which could easily be interpreted as glowing red orbs when briefly illuminated by car headlights on a dark road. Therefore, investigators proposed that a person startled by the sudden looming shape of such a large bird could easily mistake its natural features for something monstrous. The crane's powerful takeoff when frightened might also account for the unusual vertical liftoff described by the grave diggers in the first sighting. Alternatively, some wildlife experts suggest that a large nocturnal bird, such as a barred owl or great horned owl, could be the culprit behind many encounters. Owls are known for their silent flight, large forward-facing eyes that produce prominent red eyeshine, and a posture that can make them appear headless from certain angles. Beyond specific animals, the broader skeptical view attributes the entire phenomenon to a combination of misidentification and social contagion, often referred to as mass hysteria. Because the initial sensational newspaper stories created a powerful narrative, subsequent witnesses were predisposed to interpret any unusual sight through the lens of the Mothman legend. It is notable that despite over 100 documented sightings, no definitive physical evidence like a feather or footprint was ever recovered. This psychological explanation suggests the terror was real, but its source was an idea rather than a physical entity. These rational biological explanations provide a compelling counter-argument to the legend, yet they do not fully address the sheer volume of interconnected paranormal activity, including prophetic calls and the Men in Black, reported by hundreds of credible witnesses. Point Pleasant today. Decades after the fear and tragedy of 1967, the town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, now actively embraces its most famous and unsettling resident. This cultural shift is most evident in the annual Mothman Festival, an event established in 2002 and held every September, which celebrates the very legend that once terrorized the community. The town commemorates the creature with a striking 12-foot-tall, polished steel statue, unveiled in 2003, which now stands as a popular landmark and photo opportunity for visitors. Through these deliberate civic actions, the residents have transformed the narrative, turning a symbol of incomprehensible dread into a unique source of local pride. The fear that once gripped the region has therefore been systematically repurposed into a permanent and marketable cultural identity. This embrace has created a thriving local economy built almost entirely upon the enduring mystery of the Mothman legend. The Mothman Museum, founded in 2005 by local researcher Jeff Wamsley, now curates and displays the largest collection of evidence, police reports, and witness accounts from the 1966 to 67 flap. This institution, combined with the festival, draws thousands of tourists, paranormal investigators, and media crews to the small town each year, providing a significant boost to local businesses. It represents a rare and fascinating example of a community successfully commodifying its own paranormal trauma. The very real terror that defined Point Pleasant for 13 months has now become its primary tourist attraction, a dependable industry born from an unexplained phenomenon. The fear that once haunted the dark roads of West Virginia has been enshrined in polished steel, a permanent testament to a legend that refuses to be fully explained or forgotten. The next disaster. The Mothman phenomenon does not appear to be a closed chapter of history, as reports of a nearly identical creature continue to surface in disparate locations all around the world. From mining accidents in Chile to rumors surrounding tsunamis in Japan, eyewitness accounts persistently describe a familiar figure, a large, winged humanoid with glowing red eyes that manifests in the days or hours preceding a major catastrophe. The remarkable consistency of these descriptions, emerging from vastly different cultures, suggests the phenomenon is not an isolated piece of American folklore, but a recurring global archetype of impending doom. This worldwide pattern therefore forces a re-evaluation of the creature's fundamental nature, scope, and purpose, on a scale far larger than a single town in West Virginia. This global pattern raises profound questions, pushing the debate into much broader territory and suggesting one of two possibilities. The first is that a single, impossibly long-lived entity is capable of traversing the globe to appear at sites of tragedy, acting as a consistent, singular omen. The second possibility is the existence of an entire undiscovered species, a biological reality with populations that are somehow drawn to the unique energies preceding a disaster. The fact that the creature is tied to both man-made and natural disasters complicates any simple biological explanation. Because the core elements, the winged shape, the red eyes, and the subsequent catastrophe, remain constant, the harbinger theory gains significant credibility on an international scale, leaving only one terrifying question unanswered. Where will it be seen next? If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching.